Boom, according to that I am live. Welcome, this is Tokyo Tonight. It's 10:30 p.m., 10:34 p.m. Japan Standard Time, 8:34 a.m. in Panama. Thank you, Shibas, for sharing that. And welcome everybody who made it along every week, especially on short notice. I admit I was a bit distracted by the Tokyo election results happening at the moment. I'm also just curious than anything else. I'll share what's going on with that, including latest results, which are interesting. I don't know if I can actually share it very well on this screen. I feel like, let me see if I can pull this off to a side screen. Maybe I can find a good way to sort of share this and updates during the show. At the moment, boom. So yeah, if I come over here, there are basically 80 seats left out of 127 up for election. And what's sort of interesting is you've got this red line Jiminto, which is basically expected, currently has 25 seats, and Tomin, which is sort of the Koike's personal party, expecting that one to collapse. But so far, actually holding up pretty well, actually, at least matching LDP. So it will be interesting to see how things go through the evening, so I'm going to keep one eye on that anyway. But that said, yeah, in fact, probably by the end of the show, the results will be pretty much finalized. So I'll be talking about that. Of course, some interesting stuff with vaccinations and whatnot this week. The Olympics starting, I don't have much stories about that other than, of course, I think they found someone from the Serbian team. So now the Serbian and Ugandan teams have both had athletes which have coronavirus. But that said, it is what it is. There isn't much that can be done at this point. But yeah, hope you're all good. I'm good. I managed to book a work vaccination last week, but it got cancelled partly because of what I'm about to talk about with I'm not sure if it was actually the national government's fault or just logistics and stuff like that, but I also got my voucher, so yeah, hopefully I'll be able to sort out one way or another a vaccination in the near future, which I'm looking forward to. But yeah, it's definitely rainy season is now hit in Tokyo. I know you've been having crazy weather in North America, particularly British Columbia, Vancouver. It's hard to think. I was in Vancouver this time of year a couple of years ago, and it was lovely and cool. 49.6 degrees in like that area near Vancouver is just unimaginable. And hearing from people in the Pacific Northwest of America as well, of the USA, just how like, not only is it terrible because it's like in the mid-40s, but also no one there has air conditioning. It would be like 45 degrees in New Zealand, like, you know, just completely not equipped for it. So I know for those of you in that part of the world, I know you're having a tough time. Here in Japan, I don't actually have coverage tonight of the landslide in Atami. But yeah, that's unfortunately a big part of being in Japan is the extreme weather. So yeah, we've had non-stop rain here in Tokyo. Fortunately, Tokyo isn't really at risk of landslide. What generally happens in big urban areas in Japan, when I got to Japan, it was sort of like in New Zealand, people love to build places that are right beside the ocean, like you have a higher value if you're right beside the sea, or if you're on a hill and you've got a lovely view, your house will have higher value. So I couldn't understand, why does Japan not have like houses on hills, and why does it build these massive levees and obstruct the ocean from view where I'd like to surf? You know, or sort of the opposite of intuition. And then of course I saw my first earthquakes and tsunamis in Japan and realized, oh, that's why they build levees and why they don't want to build houses right on the ocean. And then with these landslides, which happen frequently, Japan is very mountainous. Yeah, you can see that Japan has the experience with these things, that when you build a city, you just make it flat. If there is a hill, you bulldoze it flat, because between earthquakes and typhoons and you know, torrential rain for long periods of time like we're having right now in Shizuoka, that led to that. Yeah, you know, you can't make anything perfectly safe, but this is just what people do in Japan, and it kind of makes sense. And it kind of also makes me think, as a biased Tokyoite, that yeah, maybe people in a place like Japan are supposed to live in the cities. I mean, the country towns are lovely, and Atami in particular, I've been to. It's an onsen town, so you know, you can't say they shouldn't be there. And those houses, those you know, hills are full of onsen and you know, bores and so on. It's like Rotorua, New Zealand's Rotorua here in Japan. So you know, it's, I kind of get why it's there, but still terrible that just to see the video as well. Amazing now everyone has a smartphone, so you know, fortunately or unfortunately, you don't just have to hear about it. You know, for everything you hear about how terrible mudslides are, to actually see one in multiple videos and see, wow, that looks just like the tsunami, like from a few years ago. pretty awful, and makes you realize just again how powerless people are for all the things that we can do. Yeah, we're still pretty powerless with that stuff. So anyway, a lot going on in Japan this week. Let's dive into the comments, see who's there, say hello, and then see if we can dive into the topics and get through. Again, not too many topics, but we'll see how we go. Dan H, bada boom, incoming. Yes, good to have you in here. Not late. Shubis is on time. I was late and Shubis was early, so going to get a coffee, go do that. Yes, good to see you. Buenos dias in Panama. Good to have you with us. Go time, says Aaron. Yes, good to have you with us. Moderator and video editor extraordinaire. Like the sheep emoji. Nice move, PB. Quinn Rankid, hello, good to see you. Good to see the regulars. We've got Mr. Cordy Chip. Shubis is early. The universe is disturbed. Andrea Mulway, boom, good to see you. Milchman too. Hey, you heard there's a party going on here. Hey, there's always a party going on here. This is the place to be. Tokyo 503, happy Independence Day to you, Yanks. Can I say Yanks? I think, well, how is that? How do Americans feel about being called Yanks? I think it's okay. And indeed, happy Independence Day. Celebrating, of course, the historical moment that Will Smith punched an alien in the face. And yeah, I don't know. I get confused nowadays. Oh, that reminds me. I watched Tomorrow War on Amazon. Yeah. Was it Tomorrow War? Yeah, Tomorrow War. I think it's called Tomorrow War. I don't know. It was dumb. I mean, it was Chris Pratt. It was okay. I mean, it was like a Michael Bay type thing. It was definitely. I was complaining about Tenet. Like I was cross-eyed and completely confused after like 5 minutes of Tenet. I mean, I like to watch stuff that's like intellectually challenging, but not stuff that's just like, you know, holding you down and slapping you in the face like Tenet does. No problems of that with Tomorrow War. It was okay. It was actually, you know, it was actually, I think the best summary I read was on Rotten Tomatoes was it was basically like a video game. The whole thing was like a video game where they're very, you know, there's very little that's unpredictable. There's a lot of great talent really not being put to the best use, but it was fun. It was fun. I'd give it like a 2.5 stars out of 5. Distracted, aren't I? Yes, I'll keep going through the welcomes. I think I've said hello to everybody so far. AV84K, a little bit late. Don't worry, I was a little bit late too. Good to have you in here. Kerberos Tenshi. I believe the Latin pronunciation is Kerberos, even though I think most English speakers say Cerberus because English is stupid. You too, no problem. Good to have you in here, Kerberos Tenshi. Also, I see people saying, giving the times. Thank you, Andrea Mulboy. Out tonight with a bunch of friends. Lucky you. Wow, I remember going out with friends. Tomorrow War was terrible. Yes, it was. All war is terrible. But especially, you know, World War Z meets Starship Troopers. Well, World War Z wasn't that great, but it was better than Tomorrow War. Starship Troopers is a classic. Still surprises me how many people... Well, I think Starship Troopers is more appreciated now than it was at the time. I loved it at the time. I correctly understood it at the time, and I was surprised how many people didn't understand that Starship Troopers was a parody of fascism. You know, it was kind of like, well, you know, space Nazis told in a positive way, but being, you know, sort of subversive, right? And so many people didn't get that. There were so many people who, when you'd say, I love Starship Troopers, they would say, oh, I also love Starship Troopers. And I would say, yeah, I love the satire in it, you know, like that. And they would go, what satire? Be careful of those sorts of people. Starship Troopers, I think, is still one of the most awesome things ever. No, Tomorrow War, I bet I can't even remember it. I watched it yesterday. So, you know, no, I would say far beyond either of those movies. 270 AJ, good to see you. Who else in here? We've got why torture yourself to watch the whole movie if it's that crappy early on? It's okay. Oh, you mean Tenet? Yeah, I stopped. I actually stopped, and then I thought, well, I paid for renting it, so I came back to watch the rest of it. But then the rental period had ran out, so I paid for it again. And I watched the second half, and then I was really angry because I paid for it twice, and it was still rubbish all the way through the second half. But that's... Yeah, Tenet was was a good lesson to be careful what you wish for. Dan H, did I check out the video about Japan tech, why the Japan tech industry collapsed? Yes, I did. I think I did. I used the words that you recommended, and it's actually, I'm going to talk about it in the topics tonight, Dan H. So yeah, I've fully got you on that. Guys, English World, good to see you. When you showed up 10:36, you thought you were late, but I was actually talking about some news. But no, I'm actually now just talking about random stuff. I'll get into the news in a minute. Don't worry. You are never late, guys. English World, good to have you in here. Odie Jr., boom. Happy American War of Treasonous Independence Day. Yes, indeed. Treasonous Secession Day. I must admit, it is kind of funny how like America became opposed to like Cuba and all these other countries doing exactly the same thing as America did. But at the same time, it's kind of natural to me in a way. The only thing that's really mysterious is, I mean, of course, America was going to rebel and become independent. It was the place where Britain sent all the people that hated the country the most. It was the transportation destination. Australia was founded because America became independent. Because both my New Zealand side and my Australian side come from Australia. I don't think there has to be some people there who were transported. Just I do have some of the family tree on that, but I would have been American if America hadn't been independent. My ancestors were sent to Australia instead. But it's kind of surprising to me that Australia, it's funny, Australia's been fighting for like 200 years to be independent, but they've been fighting with each other first on how to become independent, never able to agree on that. So they've remained under the Queen as a result, which is kind of dumb. New Zealand's never tried to be independent, by the way. So, yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, but certainly congrats to the Americans on actually ruling themselves, something that New Zealand still doesn't do. We still actually have the Queen as our head of state, which is silly. So congrats, America. I'm chasing a lot of squirrels, and we are 16 minutes in, so pull it together. Let's get into the start of this. We've got Believe in Yourself. Good to see you. Andrew Himmel will ask for a refund. No, it's okay. I take that as a life lesson. Yeah. Cobra Stitch, I watched it twice, and I'm not watching it anymore. Glad that you have butter. Quentin Rankid, no, the American Revolution is different. A revolution to reestablish the law, not to overthrow it. Well, it's a self-serving definition, but, the rest of the empire was under very much the same circumstances as America at the time that America freed itself. And, of course, they framed it in terms of justice. But, there's parts of America, where people don't have voting rights, for example. Puerto Rico, bigger than most states in America. Still shocks me actually how that works. But but all of that said, sorry, I'm throwing rocks. It's in the end of the day, the point is that I think actually Australia and New Zealand and Canada and everyone should have done what America did. Actually, America was absolutely right to have its revolution. It's actually amazing that Britain managed to control so much of the world for so long. But stop, back on track. Starship, Quentin Rankins, has everyone here read Starship Troopers, the book? Has anyone? No, I haven't read the book, and I've heard that the book is better than the movie. It's often the case, but no, I'm from Generation X, man, and I know that's close to being a boomer now at this point, but we liked 4-minute, MTV package things. I mean, nowadays I think Gen Z, they're down to like 15-second TikToks. The attention span has gone down like this. But we were at the definitely the end of the books phase. Yes, Barry Bonds, good to see you. Aaron Squirrel Life, yes, thumbs up. Is butter still sensitive? Apparently not. Look at that. The algorithm seems to have chilled its record. Maybe I'm not as triggered by it anymore. I don't know why it was censored in the first place, but. Yes, Foghart, good to have you in the comments as well. Sergeant Bilko, yeah, Ninja check, the carrot is working. Ed Avoid, good to have you in here. You've read the book. Good on you. Quentin Rankid, I sound so violent today. All this talk of revolt. The fourth belongs to America, and you have to get your own. Absolutely. No, absolutely. And by the way, Waitangi Day in New Zealand, apart from the fact it doesn't represent independence of New Zealand, because we're still not independent, and I think that's stupid. No, I definitely pay much respect to America on July 4th. I really think, I repeat, whole British Empire should have done what America did hundreds of years ago. So, congrats to America. The book was so boring, says Mr. Cordy Chip. Okay, I think I've said hello to everyone. Let's dive into the topics. I said there's not much, but you know how it goes. Also, I am on a 5-minute timer because of the screen thing with all of this. So Tokyo election tonight. What is going on with that? Yeah, the results are flowing and there are 64 left. So I might come back to this at the end of the show. But of course, Japan is not like Japan. The prefectures in Japan, 47 prefectures, are not like states. They're not sovereign. They're not. But they're like states in many ways. They don't have sovereignty in the way that states do. They're not quasi countries, but at the same time they have their own police forces, they have their own local laws, and they have their own local assemblies. And in the case of Tokyo, there's a separately elected governor and a house, as most of the country does. But of course, Tokyo gets screwed over in the national votes because, the national election, because it's so underrepresented. It only gets 1/4 the representation per person of people in the most rural prefectures like Tottori. That said, some interesting stats put up by NHK just on the election results site. This is super interesting. Nationwide, the representation of women in local assemblies, when I say local, I mean prefectural assemblies, not city councils or anything like that. The national level is 88.6% men, 11.4% women. This is largely because nationwide, at the prefectural level, the LDP, the traditional conservative ruling party of Japan, is the party that controls most of those, and they have almost no women representatives. In Tokyo, actually in 2017, the numbers actually increased from 19 to 28.3% women representation. This was largely because 2017 is when Yuriko Koike, the governor of Tokyo, who was a breakaway from the LDP, set up her own party and inspired many women to run in her own breakaway Tomin First party. Right now, that party is actually kind of collapsing in popularity because everyone's pissed off with how Koike is running the Olympics. So people are expecting that people abandoning the Tomin First party, a lot of them, the calls early before the election was that they were all going to go back to the LDP. Certainly it does appear that the Koike party, who has been fighting with Koike, the Tomin First party actually wants there to be no spectators at the Olympics, whereas Koike is sticking to the national government and the Olympics line that there should be spectators. So they've been sort of warring a little bit, but in the end of the day, Koike came out and said, no, you still should vote for my party. And when LDP thought it was going to be an easy win, it turns out they're probably not going to do as badly as they thought, but certainly then whatever it is, the number is likely to go down. Typically, female representatives come from the Communist Party, in this case, Tomin First, and the sort of more left-wing parties, which generally do better, at least in Tokyo, than in other places, but it's probably going to look more like 2013. But we'll see. I mean, it was certainly a great trend that Tokyo is, I think, got the highest level of female representation of parliamentarians, of local prefecture level representatives in Japan. Another interesting one. Tokyo is, I believe, the only prefecture in Japan. Is anywhere else have zero? These represent the percentage of seats in each prefecture which are uncontested. This is a problem in a lot of rural prefectures that they just can't find. You talk about the problem of women representation. What a lot of people say is that women don't even run. And in fact, in Gifu Prefecture, 47.8% of all the seats have nobody running except for like the one person, normally from the LDP, who just gets it by default. These are the percentage of seats that are uncontested. Okinawa, 25% of the seats are uncontested. So again, nobody is basically into it. Nobody actually even runs for local representation in most of these things. Tokyo is the only prefecture in the country where every seat is contested. So that's a good thing for Tokyo, I guess. And earlier in the evening, when there were the early signs, and I guess this is actually now kind of pointless, we are now down to 64 seats left. But you can see from these dots, the green dots are the Koike party, which is expected to lose a lot of seats this time. The red dots are the traditional powerhouse LDP. And you can see they've already got some seats, including all the Tokyo Islands. Chuoku, which only has one representative, not so many people live there. Kodaira. But yeah, Komeito is the government, is the LDP ally party. They're basically like social democrats, except they're Buddhists. Whether they're Buddhists or not is also good. They're from the Soka Gakkai sect, although because of the rules that you're not allowed to have religious political parties in Japan, they claim that they are totally nothing to do with that religion, although that's what they are. Then you got the communists in purple, and they actually, even in the early seats, the first people to be decided in Setagaya and Ota, there, the most populous wards in Tokyo, the first winner, the easiest winners were the incumbent communist representatives. Communist parties always do better in the cities And in Tokyo, yeah, there's a lot of districts where, yeah, communists are the number one representatives. Tachimin, the blue one, this is the main national opposition party, the Constitutional Democratic Party, that's been doing awfully, but they're actually doing quite well in the election tonight, relatively speaking. So yeah, they're showing up okay. And then no party. But right now, anyway, I'll show this map at the end of the evening. But yeah, the signs are at the moment that Tomin first, the Koike's party, is not going to collapse as badly as some people thought. Jiminto, which was LDP, which was expecting to get like 50 seats out of the 127 up, yeah, they've dropped their expectations to 40, and some are saying they might not even make it to that. Suga did not actually campaign for the LDP. The Prime Minister did not show up in the Tokyo elections to campaign because local LDP members were worried that he would be booed at public appearances. And also the national government was worried as well about the image of having the Prime Minister show up at, at sites around Tokyo on TV and being booed by Tokyo voters, particularly with the national election now less than 2 months away. So, and this is another thing, this is the most interesting thing about the Tokyo election, is that, yeah, it's basically the last big election before the national election, and this could really show how Suga's likely to go in the national election. And right now it's looking like they were expecting to do a lot better than they are, so that is super interesting. So yeah, we'll see. I'll come back to this at the end of the show and we'll see the results. But yeah, the main expectation is that it turns out that the Communist Party and the surprisingly the Constitutional Democrats, the CDP, is going to probably do better than was expected. The Communists, it looks like, were actually going quite strongly. The CDP and the Communists actually agreed to coordinate where they wouldn't run candidates against each other and split opposition votes in seats. So they've actually coordinated to try to maximize their seats, and looking at the results so far, it seems to be working. So that's super interesting. The other background to this, by the way, is of course Koike. She actually went into hospital last week. She's been back on the news, but she is not her normal energetic self at all. She's been very, very frail, and apparently it's collapsed from overwork, is what's the official line. Some people, I've seen people speculating randomly without any basis that, oh, maybe she got corona or something like that. But no, apparently it is actually, she's collapsed from overwork and was hospitalized from it, and she seems pretty fragile at the moment. But she did come out and say, yeah, everybody vote for Tomin first, don't vote for those LDP a-holes who are going to block her if they come into power. And that would essentially be the situation that you get, in any government, where if you have people vote for people who are against the governor, just nothing will get done or work. So, yeah, and of course I mentioned last week, Taro Aso, of course, said, oh, that was her own fault, which, again, probably contributed to the collapse of the prospects of the LDP in Tokyo. So, yeah, trust a Kitakyushu politician to ruin the stakes for the LDP in a place like Tokyo. He was one of the most unpopular prime ministers since the post-war period. So anyway, that's what's going on in Tokyo. We'll come back and check the results at the end of the show. There are 59 seats free, so probably, yeah, by the end of this, in half an hour, I expect most of the seats will be clear at that point. Just taking another peek right now. If I bring this over here so that you can see, LDP is, in fact, you can see down here. So look at that. Tomin's got 21, and LDP has gotten 17. Although they have won 6 new seats, i.e. they've taken 6 seats off Tomin. So they are doing okay. But yeah, also interesting that you can see the Purple Communist Party there. They're on 12. Komeito actually not doing too bad on 12 either. So yeah, we'll see how they go by the end of the evening anyway. I'll come back to that. Into the comments, Folkhart, do I have a new microphone or is it just more in shot these days? Oh, it's not a new one. It's probably more in shot these days would be the correct answer. Miniwara Manga, good to see you. I'm German too. It doesn't say much. I guess you weren't saying that to me, but good to see you. Yeah, I think I've got people in the comments. I'm going to jump ahead to the next topic. We are at the top of the hour, and I have covered one story, but that's kind of one with lots of different points. I got my golden ticket. I got my vaccination voucher. I was in one of the many wards in Tokyo that didn't issue vouchers to people under 65 early because they figured, what's the point? They're not going to be able to give them vaccinations until like later on in the year. And then the government said, hey, everybody, we want you, if elderly people are not coming to their reservations, give it to young people. And so all of a sudden, half of the prefectures, which were told by the government that they wouldn't have supplies to give for months and months, were told, hey, what's wrong with you? Why haven't you given vouchers to everybody? And suddenly everyone was complaining to these governments. So they were feeling very thrown under the bus by the national government, and they scrambled to get out vouchers, and I just got mine. The point being that with the voucher, with the number on it, then they can track if I get my vaccination either in my local ward or at one of the national facilities like the Self-Defense Force or Tokyo Prefecture-run mass vaccination facilities. So that would have been good news. I mean, it is good news. Of course, I could have gotten my shot at work, but a few things have happened this week. First of all, I mean, the week I suppose started good in a way. Taro Kono, the minister in charge of regulatory reform and handing out the vaccinations, who's clearly been told get as many people vaccinated as possible before the election because, you know, it's mainly the performance on COVID-19 and vaccinations that were hurting the LDP. So basically he turned all the taps and said, okay, any company that wants to vaccinate its employees, just tell us, we'll give you all the vaccinations you need. And they told all the local governments, hey, forget about doing it in order with elderly people first or whatever. Just do everybody. We'll give you all the vaccines. And that resulted in this enormous jump that you can see for Japan there. This is the number of vaccines administered over 7 days. Of course, Japan low for a very long time and suddenly very high. So it looked like it was good. And in fact, it was going so good that Taro Kono, who likes to be called Kono Taro, Japan versus Europe lately, basically saying suck it, Germany. That's more or less what he was doing. He was doing the victory dance and, spiking the ball and doing all of that, saying, hey, everyone's saying that those European countries are doing better than us. How do you like me now? And all of that. However, I mean, of course, doing the victory dance on pure raw numbers of vaccinations when, of course, Japan has like double the population of most of the countries that are on that list to begin with. But I mean, very, very good. Of course, nothing like the coverage of the percentage of the population vaccinated or the number of vaccinations per population or anything like that. But raw numbers, yeah, Japan has caught up and he took a bit of a victory dance. However, after taking the victory dance, the next day he said, yeah, about those vaccines that we told all the companies and the local governments that you can accelerate because we have all the stock, we've got you covered, you can just go ahead. We think we're only actually going to be able to supply you about a third of what you've requested from us. So you should just cancel all of those accelerated vaccinations now because we won't be able to deliver them to you. Which resulted in places like my company canceling my shot, which was scheduled for next week. And a lot of local governments, a lot of people talking about where, particularly people who are under 65, who are able to schedule, advanced vaccinations and finding out that their vaccinations have been cancelled. Worse, many people who got their first vaccination have had their second vaccinations cancelled because the supplies that were expected to come in, that he said were coming, have been cancelled. The problem is not one of supply, it seems. They're still adamant that there is enough supply of Moderna and Pfizer within Japan to vaccinate the entire population. The problem is apparently distribution is just not keeping up with the sudden demand. The rush to sort of go and accelerate like that basically meant that they can't sustain that level of supply from the central government, and they failed at that. So he's come out and basically now everybody's getting their vaccinations cancelled, and people are worried that they're not going to get their vaccinations at the right duration after the first one. And now everyone's back to being very, very angry. So yeah, I got my golden ticket, and that's good. But honestly, well, look, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not. I know I'm probably going to get a vaccination. I mean, I've got multiple options. I'm keen to get it. I work at home during the day, so I can probably, if there's somewhere nearby, I can go and be on standby somewhere. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to get it in the next couple of months. And so I'm not too worried about it. But of course, yeah, he went from bragging to suddenly cancelling 2/3 of the scheduled vaccinations for people under 65. So in terms of making the national government look good, where this is really the most sensitive issue right now, this is not so good. This is making promises, frankly, that they couldn't really back up, and probably that it always looks like it's dipping down because it takes a few days for the data to catch up. But it may very well dip down as a result of that. So that's one thing that's happening with vaccinations. The other thing that's happening with vaccinations is I mentioned last week how Vaccinations are being rolled out, but very much there's very much a messaging that this is voluntary, and that particularly that we shouldn't use vaccinations as an excuse to bully people, for example, at schools or in workplaces who don't get vaccinated. Kind of different to what the tone you're hearing in the US, where people are obsessed about getting to the 70% herd immunity and incentivizing, and hearing about hospitals firing nurses because they didn't get shots and stuff like that. And talking about vaccine passports coming out. A lot of moves to sort of really force and coerce people to get vaccines, unless there's a really good reason not to. In Japan, the voluntary nature of it is still being emphasized, and that's probably partly because they want to make sure that they can get it rolled out, to as many people who want it first, and they can see how far they get and worry about pushing it later on. But the problem with that strategy is, case in point here, there's a hospital in Okinawa, the Okinawa Chubu Hospital, where there was a cluster of something like 50 people, which resulted in 17 deaths. Among those 50 people in this cluster at this hospital were 12 nurses. The hospital apparently had 15 nurses, and 12 of them decided they didn't want to get vaccinated. They for not clear why, but they just voluntarily opted not to be vaccinated. All of them got coronavirus, and the cluster resulted in 17 people dying. Of course, Okinawa has a large elderly population that probably have more of a propensity to visit the hospital regularly. But yeah, so now the question starting to come up nationwide as to whether vaccines should be required for hospitals. Again, there's no examples in Japan of that kind of coercion, like it's sort of taken for granted in other countries. To me, it's a little bit like, being a medical worker, treating people without. I kind of get it where vaccines weren't available up until now and people had to take precautions, but if vaccines are available and you're not taking it, and you're working with patients who have it and with patients who don't have it, given the odds that you could be giving it to other people, and you had the chance to protect those patients and you didn't take it, and probably didn't inform them about that, strikes me as not being there are parallels to the idea of people who maliciously in the 80s were spreading HIV, not telling people their status and having unprotected sex deliberately. Back when everyone thought it was a fatal disease, and some people went crazy thinking, well, I'm going to take a bunch of people with me. Not quite as but there were people that were charged with manslaughter for that sort of thing back at that time. And I don't know, certainly when a hospital allows 12 nurses to turn down the chance to be vaccinated and to continue working, and those people give it to people, 17 of whom die, there's problems there, and there are questions coming up as to should hospitals make it mandatory for staff to be vaccinated in order to work at hospitals. I don't like there being too much coercion around this stuff, but there again, it shouldn't be necessary. The idea that medical workers would turn it down if it's on offer in the first place seems kind of crazy to me. And if you have too many cases like this where unvaccinated medical workers are causing people to die, you have to say, is it safe to have them working in hospitals? And how liable is the hospital, and how liable are the medical workers? Fortunately, again, Japan is not like other countries with lawsuits for, falling off ladders or anything like that. But, there is a thing. If I had a family member at a hospital for, a scrape or something minor, and they got coronavirus from a nurse and they died, you'd think at least the nurses should be safe or should be vaccinated. So, yeah, that's triggering some discussion, which hasn't really been visible in Japan until now. Another thing that was interesting, something like 11% of the population on a recent NHK survey said that they will not get vaccinated. Like, they affirmatively believe in anti-vaccine theories and do not trust it and do not want to get it. 56% of people said wait and see, so also kind of hesitant, but not like anti-vax. But 11% of people are like, no, that's going to give me 5G and microchips and Bill Gates and everything. NHK, recognizing the increasing prevalence of belief in conspiracy theories and urban myths around the vaccine, actually put up a special the other day, specifically addressing a lot of, you could say, urban myths or conspiracy theories going around, and pointing out that they are popular on SNS, but they have no scientific basis whatsoever, and they're actually harmful and dangerous things to believe, and to stop people who are spreading these. And specifically, they call out the idea that the vaccine causes miscarriages, urban myths that they can impact pregnancies, the idea that they can affect male or female fertility, and the risk of believing too much crap that you read online. Ain't that the truth? So anyway, it's good to see NHK not just being passive about this sort of thing and starting to go on the initiative and actually call out people that are spreading lies, in order to scare people. And I suppose the other problem is a lot of people read this somewhere and believe it, and then they spread it thinking that they're doing it to help people. I'm sure that's the case, actually, most of the time. But again, when it's actually, unscientific information and it actually causes public health risk, this is sort of, the result of that. The other thing, interestingly, of course, is that Japan is going to start issuing vaccine passports. There'll be paper documents, certifications of having been vaccinated from July. Interestingly as well, the EU is actually starting a digital vaccine passport. So what looks like is very likely to happen is that countries like Japan and Europe and so on are probably going to use digital versions of these passports to basically allow travel exceptions to right now to the quarantine and the travel restrictions. It's likely that vaccination is going to get you a fast track around that, which to me does make sense. There's a question as to what Japan is going to do in the case of countries that use vaccines that Japan doesn't recognize, like the Russian Sputnik vaccine and the Sinovac vaccine, and very popular in Southeast Asia. Some Eastern European countries, of course, in the EU, like Hungary, I believe, have been using the Sputnik vaccine. So some questions about that. But again, it's really about reciprocity and agreeing mutual standards. So that is likely to come into effect. And, taking it to the extreme, countries like Israel, of course, use vaccine passports for things like being able to get into restaurants and movie theaters. I know a lot of people don't like that. It sounds a little bit too fascist to a lot of people, but at the same time, if it's public health and safety, and as this article goes into, there are plenty of precedents already for entering different countries and places that you are required to have different sorts of vaccinations already. So it looks like this is a thing, and certainly given that Japan is not coercing, it's not making vaccinations mandatory for anyone. I think having a positive incentive to do it, other than like lottery tickets and guns and ammo and hamburgers and stuff like that, actually being allowed to travel to see your family, it's a pretty good incentive anyway. So there's a question about whether how they're going to accommodate people who are at heightened risk, like sensitive with allergies and so on, and can't get the shots. But I think it is the right thing to do, and it's not a right? It's a privilege that's being extended with still the default being until this thing is gone, and it might never be gone. To basically have a certification that someone's safe. So that's what's going on with vaccinations. I want to dive into the comment. So nanobots, yes. Man, I would love nanobots. You see those things in the movies? They'll like make you better looking. They'll grow your hair. They'll get you a job. I'll take all the nanobots that are on offer. AV84K, since I have the golden ticket, will Willy Wonka give me the vaccine? Hey, I'll take it. I hope so. It'd be cool if they could actually get it into chocolate. I've heard that Pfizer is working on getting it in a tablet form. Preferable to a shot. Not that I really care either way, but yes, indeed. Lots of comments, actually. I'm going to go back up here. I see that I miss Christopher Luke. Good to see you. Not a great time to be in hospital, no, especially not in Okinawa by the sounds. But it's a reminder as well that although medical workers have all had access to the vaccine now, a lot of medical workers are still deciding not to take it. And you don't know if they did or not. So, which isn't how it should be, right? If there's one place you should feel safe, it should be at least with medical workers, So yeah, indeed, that's very, very concerning. Let's go throughout here. Will I meet Willy Wonka? I certainly hope so. Dan H, what's the wait time between jabs in Japan? It's 8 to 11 weeks in the UK. Is that right? I understand that again, I don't know what it is for AstraZeneca, but the two shots on offer here in Japan are, of course, Pfizer and Moderna, and the recommended periods, I believe, are 3 weeks for Pfizer and 4 weeks for Moderna, although, of course, there's the information coming out of Europe and America, which are further along with this, saying that actually the longer you wait, possibly the more impactful, the more the benefit of the vaccine is. So maybe it's not so bad if you have to wait, 5 or 6 or 7 weeks instead of 4 weeks. I was scheduled for a Moderna one, but it got cancelled, so we'll see what happens with that. I'll take either one. They're both pretty highly effective by the sounds of it. The other thing that is interesting, of course, is some studies saying that getting the Pfizer for one and AstraZeneca for the other, or getting mixing up the vaccines somehow apparently produces a stronger immune response. Again, it's all we're trying to figure it all out at the moment. But yeah, the standard periods are 3 or 4 weeks right now in Japan. Still no golden ticket there, guys. English World. Well, it'll come out soon enough. I mean, I don't think that there's too much of a worry now. I mean, it's just a matter of how much, I suppose, risk you're at day to day. I'm working at home all the time, which is why I'm more relaxed. If I was going in to a workplace around people, lots of people every day, I'd be a little bit more nervous. So yeah, just skipping ahead. Any other comments to me? Quint Ranked, medical workers turning down the vax. Why? I think we should ask why. Well, this is the thing. In Japan, there is this thing about truth politics, truth religion. You don't ask people why. You respect that they may have a personal medical reason. They don't need to tell you that. But also there is this idea that people have the freedom to say no, including just being opposed to vaccines. They can keep that, and it's not their free right to be free from interrogation over that. Which is what is a little bit different to what I'm seeing from the Western community on Twitter, which seems to bring in the very puritanical Western view that we should be entitled to, bullying and make it want to kill itself, like the South Park song goes. There seemed to be the self-righteous, lynch mob mentality is alive and well on Western Twitter in Japan. But there again, I mean, this is the sort of thing that triggers it, right? I mean, it's not just the moral self-righteousness is triggered by a belief that it endangers health and possibly life. So, there's a lot of strong opinions about this. Christopher Luke, there is certainly intent there. People know what they are doing, and medical personnel should have a higher standard of accountability. Well, indeed. So this is, the debate which is happening in Texas right now, of course, with that Methodist hospital. And it looks like it could happen here. I mean, 17 people dead. It's not a small number, right? That's not a... And if that was avoidable, I mean, it's not clear that it was the medical workers that spread it or that originated it. Maybe the people who died would have got it anyway. Maybe they got it from another patient. But certainly the idea that they were all in a hospital and the staff had it is concerning. Good to see Tim the Asian Ink there. I think I saw the icon before it jumped ahead. Wow, so many comments. It's great to see. Tim the Asian Ink, good to see you. Scrolling. PB indeed. Nanobots would make us immortal. That's what I'm aiming for. Dan H. Suga's Seicho Senryaku Jiko Keikaku about increasing semiconductor industry in Japan seems incredibly difficult due to the majority of nanometer size, 28 to 45 plus. As I recall, Japan is still pretty good at the Renesas and those chip makers. I don't have this as a prepared thing, but Japan is still pretty good at innovating high-end semiconductors. They're not as good at right now. I mean, TSMC and Korea have obviously caught up a long way, but Japan, and they do it a lot cheaper than Japan. So that's why Japan is not competitive. But Japan still can make high-end, expensive, leading-edge, low-nanometer chips. But certainly Japan is hitting its limits. I think you're right. Dan H., you also know that Electron makes TSMC equipment to manufacture the chips, but Japanese companies don't have the intellectual property to make even sub-22 nanometer chips themselves. I am not that knowledgeable about that. Again, my only understanding is that if IBM and if American companies or Taiwanese companies want to make those chips, they require certain Japanese-made equipment in order to make those chips. But I think you're right that Japan doesn't have the capability anymore of producing those chips themselves. By the way, interesting fact, my first job in Japan as an IT consultant was at Mitsubishi Material Silicon, which is a silicon wafer manufacturer that was actually acquired by Sumitomo Chemical at Sumco. So basically the company Sumco is where I worked. I built their sales system. So I learned all about chip manufacturing. Well, actually, I learned about chip manufacturing before that, but I also spent 2 years working at a silicon wafer factory. And yeah, I mean, it's super impressive. Obviously, I mean, semiconductors are the whole story of Japan's economic rise. The fact that Japan was able to basically manufacture chips at the same size as the American ones, but rather than trying to mass produce a whole lot of chips like in America, where they would have a wafer with 100 chips on it, but only 3 or 4 would pass the quality inspection in America, and in Japan 90 would. Japan was one of those cases where they figured out that rather than making more, they would actually slow down and spend more money and make the same amount but with higher quality, and that resulted in cheaper economics. And that model worked for Japan for a long time, and it's how Japan beat America at semiconductors. The problem being, of course, that Taiwan, in particular, South Korea as well, caught up to and overtook Japan at doing the same thing. But yeah, fascinating thing. And right now, the nanometers are, it's getting down to the limits, I believe, of what you can actually make. But yeah, I didn't know that it was beyond Japan's capability to even continue competing. I mean, Renesas is still, I believe, up there, and a lot of companies still depend on the technology from here, but it doesn't surprise me that Japan maybe is no longer competing at that sort of tiny level. It's just crazy. Also, good to see Lysander 45 pouring down at the moment. So yeah, no, it's been pouring down here too. Kang and Kodos, crap, you're late. It's okay. Good to have you anytime. And of course, I'll be up here all week, and Aaron will be editing awesome shortened videos, so you don't have to worry about it. We've got 10 minutes left. I'm going to just keep jumping through this. I've got a few stories now which are shorter stories, so they won't be 5 minutes long. Sorry, Aaron, but they'll be good stories. So the first thing is, if you're opposed to the Olympics, you're a dirty traitor, says the ex-prime minister. You know, people who, anti-Japan people are strongly opposing the Olympics. Yeah, it's sort of the natural way to react, I suppose. I guess you would argue the counter that, you know, being concerned for the welfare of Japanese citizens and having their safety and health being put in danger for the sake of hosting an international event that welcomes people from 200 countries, like 90 to 100,000 people from 200 countries to come into Japan, and already bringing in cases of highly contagious coronavirus into the Japanese population. You'd expect a right-wing extremist conservative to say that supporting that would be anti-Japanese. But yeah, he's obviously, the fact that the government is so invested in backing the Olympics, including from the time that he was Prime Minister. I mean, he put on, the thing is, the only cool thing that Abe really did the whole time he was Prime Minister, in my book, was putting on the Mario costume and going to Brazil. Which apparently he hated doing that. I mean, he really hated that. But I think he feels like, since he put on the Mario costume, if people are going to die, people are going to die. Japan has to go through with these Olympics, and if you don't agree, you're a dirty traitor. That seems to be the message. And, you know, these rumors as well that if Suga is going to be out, which he could very well be if this next election doesn't go to plan for the LDP, he could be back. I don't know. I mean, you know, I don't think he was as terrible. I don't think he was the next Hitler like a lot of people were saying that he were. But there again, this kind of, you know, just stupid out there nationalist stuff is just reminds me why I really dislike him as a person, even though I thought, you know, he was not the worst prime minister that Japan's ever had. I never saw him as the antichrist like a lot of people did, but I do think he's a doofus. And that's pretty much why. So that was an interesting thing that happened. Different story. I'm going to quickly check the comments. Dirty traitor. Yeah. So into the next story. Hirai, the digital minister. Yeah, I mentioned the other week about how he had been caught on a voice recording, basically ordering his staffers to go and show up at NEC's house with baseball bats and tell them that they really should allow the government to reconsider that contract that they signed with them, that they really don't want to, even though NEC's done half of the work, and that the government contracted with them on a fixed price basis for a $73 million facial recognition system for the Tokyo Olympic events, because the government cancelled the foreign spectators, and the facial recognition system at the Tokyo Olympic venues is no longer necessary, even though NEC has been working on it for more than a year and they've already sunk the costs into it. They should take note of the size of the government workers with the baseball bat, saying that they should let the government just get off this free and release them from their obligation to pay for anything, or else they might just find that they're suddenly banned from all government procurement, basically suggesting that they intimidate them out of it. And this stuff happens. I've worked in government IT, and that's right. The fear is, the national government does not take IT companies to court. That would be cute. I remember being asked, reviewing contracts, what's the risk if we don't deliver? What's our chances of winning or losing the lawsuit? And, I've been through this enough times. They're not going to take you to court. I mean, the contracts are very one-sided, and of course, they're designed that they'll win. But no, the point is that they'll just threaten to ban you from government procurement, which will destroy your entire public sector IT business if you just don't do what they say. And that's what they do. They operate like gangsters at times. And that was clearly the tone and the substance. I mean, the fact it was caught on a recording was kind of glorious, and it implies that someone on his staff is actually out to humiliate him, probably someone friendly to NEC. In fact, I understand they're trying to figure out who the mole was, and no doubt hunt him down with actual, baseball bats. I mean, I think the person who released the recording of that was taking a huge professional sort of career risk. But that's the point, right? That's what you're dealing with. And they asked the minister. He was at the Foreign Press Association. They asked him, does he regret ordering his staffers to go and intimidate NEC? And he says, not at all. I'm trying to save tax money for taxpayers. I need to rescue every yen for taxpayers. So I have no problem at all with going out and bashing up IT companies to get money back. So yeah, that was a thing. Come back to this in a moment. No comments there. EDIR, good to see you. And everybody else. Next story. Dan H, you told me to watch this video. I watched this video. I think this is the video you told me to watch, right? I'm pretty sure it is. Dan H, you asked how much time is spent, how much do you make Aaron's life difficult editing videos? I actually do respond to comments in between the videos, so it's not that disruptive. But here, you've got a whole topic that is from you now. This is a good video and a good YouTube channel. Mayuko something or other. She's an American Japanese, I believe both, maybe born in Japan or certainly Japanese parents, but grown up, she's American. She works and lives in Silicon Valley. She's never worked in Japan. So she sort of gave all that setup to her take on how the IT industry in Japan sort of fell behind Silicon Valley. And I kind of thought, oh, okay, this is going to be basically like, it started me with a very negative predisposition, thinking this is just going to be kind of an amateur take from someone who's a Nikkei, who feels like they know about Japan but has never actually worked here, and is going to give kind of stereotype views of IT in Japan, some of which are probably accurate. But that said, the video is really, really good. She actually focuses on interviewing a lot of people from the IT industry in Japan, albeit people who are in Silicon Valley who are from Japan. So, there's a bit of a positive bias towards Silicon Valley and so on. And particularly, she's got a little bit of an overinflated view of the position of Mercari, which albeit admittedly is the first unicorn in Japan. But of course, when you're in Silicon, unicorn is like the success standard. In Japan, there's only one unicorn, but yet there's a bunch of successful IT companies. So I think she sort of overblows some things a little bit. She sort of ignores altogether the fact that she focused on negative IT culture in Japan as being very much the IT culture in places like NEC that we're talking about right here, places like that. The big IT companies. I used to work at a big IT company as well, doing enterprise IT in Japan, like system building for Japanese companies. Sucks. It's horrible, and everything that the commenter said and that her stereotypes were sort of about were pretty much accurate, and I endorse them, and that's the world that I sort of work in. That said, there are a ton of pretty successful and creative Japanese startups. The idea that they don't exist is wrong. And they're often generated by frustrated engineers who start out in those big companies and realize how miserable it is and go and set up their own businesses. And there is a startup culture in Japan. I mean, measuring it by the standards of Silicon Valley, even most places in America would fail. However, it was I thought it was a really well presented, well thought out. She did a lot of interviews for it, and it's a good video, and you should go watch it, Why Japan Fell Behind in the Tech Industry. By the way, I left a comment on it. I subscribe to the channel. I'm endorsing the video here. I have critiques of it, which I wrote, which you can read in the comments there. It's long. It's slightly obnoxious. But it's a good video, and I highly recommend watching it. And I thank Dan H for the recommendation for this, so go and check that out. TK Sam, I'm a hot Kiwi dad. You're damn straight. I am. That is, he speaks truth. Next video. Another good video that I watched, actually, I think it was in the recommended videos from that last one, but this is actually a video that, again, maybe Dan H and others are interested in, might be interested in. It's the economy of Japan, how a superpower fell from grace in 4 decades. And it is this person has a channel that is just based on talking about macroeconomics, talking about the central bank policies of different countries. And while that sounds like painfully boring, he strings together the narrative really, really interesting, and he basically talks about Japan from the 1970s to the 2010s, more or less, through the lens of only central bank policies in Japan, and specifically how Japan got into a bubble, how the bubble collapsed, the different attempts to fix it, what Abe tried to do, how well it went. And even for me, it's like, oh, this is really interesting. Like, I've been living through this, and I actually didn't know a lot of this stuff, and he explains it in a very accessible, interesting way. I was like, wow, this is actually this is a really great insight into what happened in Japan, and indeed what has happened in Japan that is now happening in other countries. So that is super interesting. I do recommend this video if you're interested in economics at all and Japan. I mean, this is like the best video I've seen for a while. Just not IT, talking about Japan in general, but super interesting. So check this out, the economy of Japan, how a superpower fell from grace in 4 decades. It's a good video. Go watch it. Next topic. Got 1 minute left. Well, I started 4 minutes late, so I've got 5 minutes left. But yes, rapid fire a little bit. Sorry, Aaron, this will make the editing a little bit tricky, but yes. Next topic. Mitsubishi Electric CEO has basically quit over fake inspections. What specifically happened was that it turned out that since the 1980s, Mitsubishi's process for manufacturing air conditioning units for trains had an inspection, like a quality inspection step that apparently the practice of the people in the factories for 3 or 4 decades had been, just not to do it and just check off in the box that it was done. Now, these were not like safety inspections or safety records. They weren't forging the PSC reports and stuff like that, which is originally what I thought it was. So apparently this wasn't actually a violation of law. It was a violation of internal process. Also, some people from the company did point out that there were apparently no problems, reported with this equipment. There was never a case of an inspection which actually let out a faulty unit this entire time. However, as the CEO himself acknowledged, it reflected a culture within Mitsubishi Electric that, this had become established practice to skip over quality checks on products. And that was reflected a deep-seated cultural issue that had actually been perpetuated over decades. And he felt, the CEO, he probably wanted to retire early and take responsibility and acknowledge that it had to be changed. What's really disappointing about this, apart from the fact that there are multiple cases like this in many Japanese companies in recent years where, this idea that they have this great quality or whatever. I mean, in a way, you could say there was no actual real problem and no violation of law, but he quit anyway. So you could say maybe there are actual high standards, or at least aspirations of high standards. But there again, you've got the Mitsubishi Group. And although, of course, the Mitsubishi Group are not like, it's not like World War II where they were an actual, zaibatsu all connected, but there is a culture among Japanese companies. I mentioned I used to work at Mitsubishi Material Silicon, and I was there when they merged with Sumco. I was from an IT company at the time, but the problem with the merger was that Mitsubishi's processes were more slack than Sumitomo's, and they had trouble matching up because Mitsubishi was all over the place. Then you had, while I was there, 2002, you had the Mitsubishi safety, the car safety issue, where again they were hiding crash reports in a locker, and it turned out that they were like Pajeros with engines catching on fire spontaneously. And I hated this because that scandal killed Mitsubishi Motors. In Japan, nobody buys Mitsubishi Motors except for trucks and buses, and they mostly get exported here. They lost the trust of the Japanese public because they were covering up these sort of safety issues with their cars. It seems over and over again, Mitsubishi Group companies have these same problems of just being slack around quality and safety. And I think that's partly what played into this as well. Good to see that they took it seriously, but Sergeant Bilko. Ha ha ha. Anyway, comments. I see people talking to me. Cobras Tenchi. Yes, I did. Thank you. I watched the video, and I believe Did I talk about that last week? I did watch it. Thank you for the recommendation, Tesla Model S Plaid. And indeed, it turns out that was a dirty lie. And I put it onto Twitter, and some people got upset, and they argued with me, and I argued back because I watched the video that you shared with me. Thank you, Kuberus Tenchi. The Model S Plaid is not a sub 2 second 0 to 60 mile an hour car, because it's got a little asterisk on it. Apparently, it's only sub 2 seconds if they give it a rolling start and they started at 6 miles per hour, i.e. it is sub 2 seconds at 6 to 60 miles per hour. And apparently no one tests cars like that, so it's literally a lie. Which is like, it's a 2.2 second 0 to 60 car. That's braggable enough. You know, the idea that they had to actually fake the standard in order to get it under 2 seconds is kind of ridiculous. And of course, I'd still love to drive one. But yeah, no, thank you for the recommendation. Super interesting, Kuberus Tenchi. Dan H, thank you for the recommendation. Indeed, glad that was the video. And you would also recommend the Asianometry video on the Tokyo Electron. Thank you. I will look that up. Your recommendations are good to follow, so I will do that. Kuberus Tenchi, what are the election results? I will show that at the end of the show. Make sure to check the election results. Yes, I will check the election, which I am pronouncing correctly. PB, what is my personal best 5K time, if I don't mind sharing? I've probably got it on the app somewhere. You know what? I think, did I get sub 20? I think I got sub 20 the other day, which is kind of nuts. I'll check it. It's around 20 minutes, which is crazy. That's faster than I ran at high school. But lately I've done that. Thank you for asking, PB. In fact, yeah, I don't want to show you my whole phone looking for it, but I can look it up. But it was definitely, it was either 20 minutes something or just under 20 minutes. I broke my 5K record the other day. So yeah, but that was, you know, obviously at a good patch, which probably had a lot of downhills and stuff like that. But yeah, lately I've been fast. I haven't been running this week because it's been raining the whole time. But yeah, squirrels, I know there are still some more topics I want to to cover. But yes, indeed. Yeah, indeed, he does look like someone who's caught. Final story, second to final story. Pepper, the robot, the friendly robot that greets people at SoftBank stores, has been murdered by SoftBank. Apparently, weak demand. Of course, when you don't have people in shops in the first place, orders for it stop, and really, it doesn't actually do anything. You know, they bolted an iPad to its chest, and it waves its hands around. And it says hello, hello. But it's not really an AI thing. So yeah, I mean, you know, the robots are not taking us over yet. If people have seen the latest Boston Dynamics video where they're all dancing, that's some crazy, like, that looks like CG stuff, but then you see it's actually legit Boston Dynamics, and, you know, those are some crazy robots. Pepper, you know, is, well, I mean, I for one welcome when Pepper will be actually ruling us. But for now, SoftBank has decided that they're going to kill Pepper. And not much you can do about that. There again, for those who feel like, particularly people like Dan H. worried about Japan falling behind technologically, I just remind everyone that Japan just started shipping its cube-shaped watermelons. And, you know, need I say more? I mean, you know, Japan is just, some ways it is falling behind, of course, but in other ways it remains 100 years in the future for absolutely no reason, because, of course, these watermelons are not actually edible. You can't eat them. Apparently they're disgusting in the middle, but they just figured out how to make them this shape, so people put them on display, and they pay like $200 or $300 for them. But it's worth it. I've seen one of these things. They are amazing. You know, and in the end of the day, who needs a high-tech economy when you can make cube-shaped watermelons? That's my thought. Final thought for the week. I'm actually not doing too bad for time. I am over an hour. It's 1 hour, 2 minutes, but I'm not doing too bad. Final thought is, yeah, now that I'm starting to think ahead to that time when we have vaccines and whatnot, yeah, I'd love to do spending so much time on Twitter, and of course here on YouTube this whole time. And I'm enjoying interacting with all the people that I interact with, you people here in the comments here, and of course people on Twitter. And just thinking I'd love to do a tweet up sometime. It'd be nice to do a meetup and to actually say hello to the people I've been conversing with for, you know, the last 18 months when I've been trapped in this room. It's a nice room, but still. I'm quite looking forward to that. So, you know, there's something I think I'd like to do. Probably wouldn't be until next year, but yeah, I will definitely put out the word when I plan to do a tweet up, meet up, YouTube get together, whatever you want to call it. I think it'll be good. So yeah, that is all the topics for tonight. We are through, not doing too bad on time. Oh yeah, election results. I said I'd show the election results. There are 28 seats left, according to that. So out of 127, there are most seats are now settled. And how is it going? Look at that. Tomin First is doing pretty well. Really surprising, actually. So they are actually 21 to 27. Of course, they're coming in with 45, 28 to 21. But LDP is expected to make gains, but their hopes of getting to 50 look like, I mean, they'd have to get every single seat remaining. In fact, even if they got every single seat remaining, they wouldn't get to 50. And they're not going to get every single seat remaining. So LDP clearly, if they, and for those of you who are interested, when you look at the results later on, if LDP does not get to 40, if they get like in the 30s at the end of this, which looks like where it's going, that would be considered a disaster for Suga and the national government going into the national election in the next wee while. So that's interesting. The communists have won 3 extra seats. Ain't no party like a communist party. Yeah, they've done pretty well. And the CDP has won 5 new seats. So they've actually gained. Interesting that so it looks like the people who have profited from Tomin's fall have been 6 seats to the LDP, although they're expected to take more of them. 5 to the Buddhist Party, which is interesting because there was talk that they might not do so well. But there again, when you're members of, I mean, you're not supposed to say that they're all members of a religion, but they are members of a religion. They're going to show up and vote. So, you know, they've got a stable constituency. So they've gained a little bit. But the CDP, which I thought was finished, a lot of people did. This is interesting as well. The Ishin no Kai, basically the Osaka First Party, the We Want to Be Osaka Party, has a representative. I don't understand why anyone in Tokyo would vote for the Osaka Party, but some crazy place did. So let's go have a look at the map. Let's see where we're doing. So where I live, there is no LDP representation. Limited number of seats. In fact, a lot of places, the red dots are LDP, and where I am, there are only 2 seats and 3 candidates running. And yeah, they are not. It turns out LDP got 3rd place. They didn't get represented. So a lot of green dots when people were not expecting that. The purple dots are the communists. So super interesting. Oh, look at that, Otaku. Ota is where apparently someone in Osaka, in Otaku, wants it to be. I mean, they get so the first 7, the top 7 ranked candidates get to be represented. So, you know, pretty easy to get represented relatively in Otaku, but one of them is like the Osaka First Party. So that's an interesting thing. So yeah, there are 28 seats to go. But I'll tell you what, when you check these results at the end, I would say Tomin hanging on the way it is pretty remarkable. And between them and the communists and the CDP, which are basically the national opposition, if they get in, yeah, it looks like it's been pretty bad for the LDP. Surprisingly good for the Komeito Party. So yeah, that's where it's at Tokyo at the moment. Oh, I just realized that's not in frame there. I'm going to move this across. So yeah, the green, Tomin doing surprisingly well. LDP not looking like they're going to get to 40 at all. So that is interesting. Let me bring that down there. 28 left to go. The Buddhists there, the 18, doing surprisingly well. Communists doing surprisingly well. In fact, they look like they're going to exceed their 18 from last time. And the CDP, which everyone had written off, looks like they've already exceeded the number of seats that they had, so they're doing pretty well as well. So interesting night. Anyway, you'll see all the commentary on it. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter if you want to keep up and chat with me during the week or whatever. I don't mind DMs and stuff like that. Thanks to everybody who left comments, and particularly people like Dan H and Kerberos Tenshi. If you recommend videos, yeah, I went and watched them and they were good, and I'll talk about them next week. So thank you for the recommendations as always. Yeah, EEDIR. So from the middle towards the wings of politics. It's still kind of the middle. Tomin is the middle. Communists, well, to me, communists are towards the fringes, but they're actually less towards the fringes than you'd probably think. CDP, yeah, they're sort of in the middle, drifting towards the left. But yeah, it's actually, I mean, there's not really people to vote for. Hey, Tawaiwai, good to see you. Thank you for asking for election results. That means we are going to be 10 minutes over, but that's okay. Everybody stay safe, of course. Get your shots if you can get them. Stay safe. Be nice to the people around you, and have a great week. Hope you enjoyed the show. Remember to like if you liked. It does help. And, and there it goes. the screen went off 5 minutes. So yeah, anyway, have a good week, everybody, and boom, peace. See you later. In stream, and